Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Tuesday, May 26th, and I'm Blair Kerkhoff. Lately, we've been reminiscing about the Royals' 2015 postseason. Maybe baseball's ready to get on with the present tense as owners and the players' union sort out the finances of restarting. But I wanted to take at least one more look back at the 2015 playoffs, and more specifically, the World Series drama that unfolded off the field before Game 1. It started in the late afternoon, during batting practice, I believe. The father of Royals starting pitcher that night, Edinson Volquez, had passed away that day. The team learned about this before Edinson did, and they had to decide when and how to tell him. Star columnist Vahe Gregorian and I spoke to Royals manager Ned Yost about this and other topics recently, and Vahe turned this part of the conversation into a column that's included with the story links in the show notes. So what we'll do on today's podcast is play back what Ned told us about the situation during the interview, and we'll take a break, and when we return, Vahe and I will pick up the conversation about the 2015 Game 1 behind-the-scenes drama.
We had just gotten through with batting practice, and I was on the field. I think I was walking out, and the opposing team the Mets had just stepped on the field, and Dayton came up to me, and he grabbed me by the arm, and he pulled me away. He goes, "Listen," he said, we've got a problem." I said, "Well, what's the problem?" And he said, Eddie's dad just passed away. And he said, "I don't know, what do you think we need to do?" And I'm like, oh my God. Here, Eddie Volquez's dad, Eddie's sitting there in the locker room, and his dad's waiting for him to pitch Game 1 of the World Series, and now he's gone. And I said, "Well, Dayton, we got to tell him. We got to tell him." And Dayton said, "Well, I think we need to tell him too," but the family said, "Please don't. They want him to pitch. They want him to pitch for his dad. And if he finds out, he's not going to be able to pitch." So I'm like, okay, well, if the family said that they want him to pitch, his wife and his mom want him to pitch, then I'm going to do everything that I can to allow that to happen. So, but then again, now you've got that knowledge, and I kept coming out of my office about every 5 minutes and walking past Eddie's locker to make sure that he hadn't heard about it, with the social media and everything going on. But he was sitting there with Johnny Cueto and Ventura, and they were laughing and they were talking every time I went by. So I found Chris Young, who was in the weight room, and I said, "Listen," he said, this is between me and you, all right, but you need to get yourself ready to pitch tonight." He goes, what's up? And I said, "Eddie's dad just died." Well, Chris had gone through that, and Moose, as a matter of fact, he had lost his mom, and Chris lost his dad earlier in the year, so he understood the emotions behind that. And I said, he doesn't know, the family doesn't want us to tell him, but if he finds out, I don't think he's going to be able to pitch. You need to be ready to go. So he goes, "I got you, I'll be ready." So I kept watching. Finally, Eddie gets dressed, walked out to the field. I'm thinking, okay, now we should be good. And, the whole time I kept thinking about Eddie's dad, and Eddie when he's out there competing his tail off. And he ended up getting us through the 6th inning. He was at 100-something pitches, and he walked in, and I said, "Eddie," with our bullpen, I knew he was done. But Eddie, the competitor that he wasn't done, right? I said, "Eddie," that's it. He goes, No, I'm good. I need to go back out." And I said, "No, you're good. You're good. We got our bullpen's going to handle it." He goes, "No, I need to go back out. I want to go back out. I'm not good. I'm good. I want to go back out. I said, "Eddie, look." I grabbed and put my hand on his shoulder. I said, "You need to go upstairs." And he goes, "No, I don't want to go upstairs. I'm good. I can go one more inning. I can give it one more inning." And I said, "Eddie, you're good. You need to go upstairs. You need to go upstairs right now." And it was hard for me right there to hold it together. And he turned around. He was really upset. He wanted to pitch one more inning. But he turned around and went upstairs. Of course, Dayton and Eddie's mom and Eddie's wife were waiting for him in my office. And, that's when he found out. And so it was really emotional. He was pretty upset. "Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to know, but we wanted you to pitch. Your dad was watching that game, and we wanted you to pitch." So, of course, I didn't get a chance to see Eddie after the game. I think we played game one went, how many, 12 innings or something? Hit the walk-off sacrifice fly.
I think was it 14 innings, was it?
Yeah.
It was 14 innings.
That's okay. It was 14 then. Yeah. So I didn't have a chance to talk to Eddie, and he had caught a flight to Dominican right away. So we had kept in kind of contact with his agent, and he was going to be back for Game 5. So when I saw Eddie, I'm like, put my arms around him, and he was so appreciative. Everybody reaching out, but I'm like, okay, I hope mentally he's going to be okay, because this is going to be a big game for us. And ended up giving up a home run to the leadoff hitter, Anderson. I'm like, here we go. Come on, Eddie. But he ended up only giving up one more run, and same situation. Sixth inning came along, and I'm like, I wonder if he's going to fight me. And I walked over and said, Eddie, you're done. But he was emotionally drained. He put his arms around me and said, thank you. There was no fighting at this time.
Well, what a powerful situation that was for even those of us just following it from outside. But I can only imagine the emotions the team felt, and you felt, and of course Eddie felt.
Well, it was so raw because we had gone through it. It seemed like once a month. Chris Young's dad passed away, and then Chris went out. He passed away that night. Chris went out and pitched 5 innings of no-hit ball because it was his turn to start the next day, and he wanted to do it for his dad. And he just gave everything he had, and of course, we were so close as a group. Everybody, everybody felt it. Everybody felt the pain of Chris losing his dad. Then when Moose lost his mom, everybody felt the pain of Moose losing his mom. So we all knew, as tight as we were and as close as we were, the feeling that Eddie was going through, and the emotion. I think knowing it's the World Series, and his dad's not going to be able to see him pitch was raw for all of us.
Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners: unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. So we just heard from Ned Yost, Vahe, and you wrote a column about the Game 1 drama that was, behind the scenes, that started with the news of Edinson Volquez's father dying without Eddie knowing about it. And Dayton Moore, I guess, was the person who in the Royals front office who was told about it. He told Ned, and then the decision was made, I guess in consultation with the family, whether to tell Eddie that his father had died. And the Royals decided, and I guess with the family's blessing, that was they were not going to tell Edinson Volquez, starting the biggest game of his life, Game 1 of the 2015 World Series. So it was. Now, at this point, we didn't know what was happening, and us covering the game. This was all going on in the clubhouse and on the field during batting practice. I guess we didn't know it was happening, but we found out during the game. And when we were talking to Ned about this conversation that you and I had with Ned was a couple of weeks ago. But I was kind of struck by the vividness of the memory that he had of that night. He was uncertain about some other things. I remember you and I talking, but he remembered almost every detail about that night.
He did, and about that specific thing. And I think what was, my biggest takeaway from what Ned said, and we have confirmed this in conversations with other people in the Royals organization, and it's sort of been, once the sort of truth came to light, the arc of that has stayed pretty true to what we've learned. But I think the key point here is that it's understood that the family, it wasn't even just that the Royals sort of consulted with the family, my takeaway is that the Royals did what the family wanted them to do. Now, maybe that's, maybe it could be spun a little differently, but I think the Royals would have told Edinson Volquez if the family hadn't said, we want him to pitch and we don't think he can pitch if he knows.
Right.
That's my thought. Did you feel like that?
No, that's right. That was my interpretation.
And I'll tell you this too. You know, and I know through both professional and really even personal experiences with Dayton Moore that he's pretty conscious of the humanity of it all. I mean, and the implication of them doing that without the family pushing that would be almost using Eddie. And I just don't. But at the time, and this is, I guess, why this is important, there was a lot swirling around about what was, known or not known.
Right.
And
who knew it? And who didn't?
Who knew it? Was it being kept from him by, some sinister plan of the Royals? Or the alternative, he knew and he was just biting his lip and pitching. And we had some of our own professional frustration that night a little bit, I think, trying to ascertain what was real. But it was precisely because they were trying to get to the truth of it themselves and I think try to manage the situation, which maybe sometimes it's hard for us to appreciate because we want it now and we see conflicting reports out there. But I do feel like we were pretty disciplined in trying to sift down to the truth before we made any assumptions.
Right. I think in 5 years later, it seems apparent now that the family believed this was the best course of action for Eddie that night, was to take the ball and not know what had happened back in the Dominican.
Yeah.
And
yeah. It's funny. One of the reasons we all were pretty fond of Eddie, right? He was
absolutely
always so easy to deal with.
Clubhouse favorite.
Maybe the favorite in there, mm-hmm. right? And about a month before that, somewhere in September, late August, I guess, I've been starting to bug him, trying to see if I could sit down with him to do a longer story. And kind of took a couple weeks, and I sort of thought maybe he just didn't quite want to do it. Then one day, I'm standing on the first base side. It's not a day he's pitching, and he says, I'll talk to you for a few minutes after, shagging flies or whatever. And he comes over. We talked standing on the field till like 10 minutes before game time for like an hour and a half. And it was such a delight. And most of it I recorded, but a lot of it was just talking to a really interesting and engaging guy. So one of the things I felt like I had a feel for from that was that, as with many fathers and sons, right, that baseball's part of their relationship, and it was deep part of their relationship. I mean, from his dad taping Pedro Martinez to have Eddie able to see it all the time, the buying of his first glove, all these things. So knowing, I don't think we found this out till later. I didn't know, at least till spring training when it was an easier time to talk to Eddie. That he had talked to his dad the night before, and his dad had some heart issues, but he told him he was fine. But I imagined
and was thrilled to hear that Eddie was starting Game 1 of the World Series.
Yeah, put two and two together here. Would this man not have been here for the games if he weren't?
Right.
If he were full physical
capability.
So I'm not sure we knew everything about his condition, but clearly not well enough to be in the States for the time of his life.
What do you remember about the way the news seeped out? So we're in the press box. We've got TVs on in the press box, but not always audio. I mean, we're just watching images. I don't remember if we had audio on that night.
I don't think we did.
Maybe it was through Twitter that word was starting to.
Yeah, I think we were following up. It seems to me, tell me if I'm right about this. Seems to me by late afternoon, let's say the game started 7:18 here. Let's say, I don't know, 5:47. Somewhere in there, it's popping out, and I sort of think I distinctly remember not our friend Marley Rivera, but another maybe it's somebody with ESPN Deportes or something having the first report. and that his father had died. But somewhere soon thereafter, if not right then, and I don't want to impugn anyone because I don't know who specifically did it, but the implication was, oh, Edinson Volquez knows.
Yeah.
And
we know that.
And remember, so by first pitch, we were, I think, all like, my goodness, does he know? He knows his father just died, and he's pitching right now, and I think probably because of that, you get this stuff in your head. I seem to remember, and I may be as guilty as anyone, of just thinking like, looking for signs in his demeanor. Oh, he definitely knows, or stuff like that. But luckily, just having the dopey impressions, but I don't think doing anything with them. I mean, I think we were all pretty restrained. I think we avoided the speculation that we would regret. But then I think the other thing that came about then was like, you started hearing the other shift, right? The thing we alluded to earlier, like, oh, well, he doesn't know, and it's because the Royals refused to tell him.
Right.
And obviously that was not there either. So I think we were all feeling this enormous tension because we knew something he didn't know, or whether he did or didn't, we knew something big and didn't know how he was processing it or what to do with it.
Well, and Fox Broadcasting, but the game was on Fox, right? It wasn't ESPN, it was Fox. They had a decision to make too about the news because it was known in the booth. The crew of Joe Buck and Harold Reynolds and Tom Verducci, and then in the dugouts, Ken Rosenthal. They knew the news, but decided not to report it. What do you know about that?
Yeah, well, a couple things interesting there too, and this is implied, but it's something worth reminding our listeners to. Probably most of the people in the stands knew, right? Because they were getting their news from other outlets.
They got cell phones.
They got cell phones, and I say most. I don't know. I mean, maybe 50% didn't know, but you can't imagine that people that knew weren't telling the person next to them, and the TV audience. They didn't get it from Fox, but that was, again, certainly not their only news outlet they were following this through.
Right.
So, as we came to understand later, naturally Fox was aware of it, but made a decision that they weren't going to put it on air until they knew Edinson Volquez knew. And that was, as we understand it, again, with a little help from behind the scenes with the Royals, that I don't know if negotiated is the right way to put it, but it was talked through as this is the human way to do this.
So Volquez pitched 6 innings
that
night, and so in the 8th inning, that's when Joe threw it down to Ken Rosenthal, Joe Buck, and this is what Ken Rosenthal had to say on the air. I hope I'm pushing the buttons correctly here, but here's Ken Rosenthal's report in the 8th inning on Edinson Volquez.
Joe, Edinson Volquez is together with his family right now in the Royals clubhouse, together because of some awful news. Earlier today, Volquez lost his father, Danio, who passed away in the Dominican Republic at age 63. It is not yet clear whether Volquez was aware of the news at the time he pitched. We will know more after the game and, of course, send our condolences to Volquez and his entire family.
Right. We still didn't know at the time he was pitching whether Edinson. We knew his father had passed away. What was unclear was did Edinson know that?
Yeah, and I think the way that everybody came to understand it was clear was his reaction when he was told. Mm-hmm. He was distraught. I think, if memory serves, from a few things I've written over the years, I don't think I included this in the column I wrote the other day, but part of his dismay, anger, whatever, was about, why wasn't I told? But when it was explained to him, I don't know if he immediately processed that, but he certainly explained to me and others later that he realized and he would not have been able to pitch. I don't know if we've ever had the full talk with him about, well, if you could have drawn it up, would you have said, don't tell me and don't pitch?
Right.
What's the combination there? But of course, the bookend of this is I know we'll talk about too. The bookend of this is how he ends up starting Game 1 and Game 5 under these, not equally, but certainly each poignant, tumultuous, crazy circumstances.
Wasn't with the team for games 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
Because he was in the Dominican for his for the services for his dad.
And that service, in the Dominican, it's my understanding, it's my recollection and my understanding that the funerals are held pretty fast because of just some lack of things we might have here to be able to keep everything, the way you'd want it, ideally for a funeral with the bodies and things like that. I hate to be so blunt, but it's my recollection. I think the funeral was the very next day. I mean, he was flying out that night. I think the game was that a Monday game, Blair?
Boy, I cannot remember.
I can't quite remember. It seems like in my mind it was Monday and the funeral was Tuesday. Maybe I'm off a day, but I'll never forget the pictures of him from the funeral. Every one of them, this was a shattered man. And so there was real doubt about whether, he might be able to do this. And again, his family plays a big factor here. His mom pulled him aside that night and said, he would want you to pitch. So he did.
And I love something that Ned told us also that we reported at the time, but it was good to be reminded that the Royals had some experience here with the father of Chris Young and Mike Moustakas' mother. Yeah. That season, right?
Yeah.
So they had handled similar situations, and of course Ned, as you heard earlier, spoke of it as something of I don't know if a galvanizing force is the right word, but just it showed the compassion of that clubhouse, in a way that doesn't afford itself often to other clubhouses, but it did for the Royals that year, and it kind of helped Ned define what this team was and what it was about.
I think so. And Ned saying that reinforced the thought to me in a way maybe I hadn't thought that much about before, although I do always remember thinking, this is pretty unusual. 3 parents' deaths, one in August. Mike Moustakas' mom, Connie, was in August, a couple of weeks after he'd been home and seen her for the last time and given her his All-Star Game jersey. Chris Young, his father had been ill for some time. Mike's mom had been ill for some time too. But Chris pitching that day, 5 innings and no hit ball.
Right.
But absolutely, finding that sweet spot where you're fueled by this trauma. I mean, for lack of a better term, I think that's hard to imagine. It's funny. I thought about this. I didn't include this in anything I wrote, but I remember thinking, we all can relate to loss. We can't all relate to having to perform with loss. And that's
at the highest level in the most pressure situation that the game avails. Yeah.
Yes. And particularly with Edinson, right? But it's so there was a certain extra bond among those 3 guys, but it spread throughout the clubhouse. And, I've talked about this kind of ad nauseum and written about it a number of times. But one of the most striking, if I'm ever doing the, top 10 favorite sports moments, one will always be being on the field late after that game, which was kind of fascinating for us anyway.
Absolutely was.
I'm not sure I recorded as many images in my head as I would, because you're kind of you're on scan looking for who you have to go talk to. You're not just. But I will say this: I got up. I'm going Eric Bieniemy on you. I got up on the pitcher's mound that night, which I'd certainly never done a major league thing, and just stopped for a minute to get above it all and just look around and appreciate the moment. And that was right then that I saw Edinson nearby talking to, I believe they were reporters from the Dominican, but certainly Spanish-speaking reporters. And then a few moments after that, Mike Moustakas came over with the trophy to hand him.
Oh, wow.
And whispered in his ear. And I asked Mike later what he said, and or Mike or Edinson, and just that he loved him and that his dad must be really proud of him right now. And every time I look at the picture, every time I think about it, it chokes me up because it was such a genuine bond and something, really only people that had gone through that in a short order in the same circumstances could appreciate together.
Yeah. And Volquez pitched great that night.
And he did.
Another 6 solid innings for the Royals.
But remember, too, the funny thing, not funny, exactly, but my goodness, home run on the first at-bat.
Yeah, the Granderson home run.
And you're like, well, maybe he just can't go.
Right.
And then one other hit in 6
Yeah, one
innings.
other run. I think he in the
And one run and one hit.
In the 5th or the 6th, he loaded the bases.
Yeah, no outs.
With no outs, and it was one run.
I didn't remember that until I rewatched the game last week. That this was no bases loaded, nobody outs. And they got one run out of it.
Yeah.
That was
Huge.
pretty crucial. Yeah, I was surprised they didn't hook him then. Actually,
Yeah, there was. I think
in hindsight,
they had Hoshea maybe
Herrera, maybe was warming up.
Herrera in the bullpen. Yeah.
Also, I forgot Herrera pitched 3 innings that night. 3 innings.
Royals did a lot of that in that
Yeah, they did.
postseason. A lot
They
of
did.
multiple innings from those guys. So, well, it was great talking to you about this story that I found just really interesting. I loved your column on Sunday, and we've linked to it in the show notes. But before we leave today, Vahe, we're recording this on Tuesday afternoon and hopefully posting it a couple hours later. Before we started recording this, we learned that a friend of ours in the business had passed away. Chris Dufresne, who spent so many years as a national college sports writer for the Los Angeles Times. But in the last, 5, 6, 7 years, he took a buyout at the Times and was still doing his magical thing for other publications. I think most recently SI.com, but I know he and our other buddies, Mark Blotchen and Tony Barnhart and Herb Gould, started the Media Guides, which perfect name for their website that where they wrote about college football. But Chris was 62 years old, and we were just flabbergasted by the news. And I'll remember Chris as one of the wittiest journalists I have ever known. Made me smile he couldn't write something without making me smile. And loved being around him at college football games, national championships. He'd some other, he covered other sports as well, but it's mostly college football that I'll remember him for.
Yeah, that's where I saw him at the most, and saw him at the Olympics some. And you said it so well. I mean, really, the wit always showed up in his writing. It also showed up in his, just gracious and kind way that we'd see him. I mean, he was always fun to be around. And he did grace our profession. I mean, I think, we've been lucky to be around people like that you feel like make us all feel better about what we do and who we get to do it with. And Chris is absolutely one of those guys. And, for us both, I mean, it was, whoa, Chris Dufresne just died. And it's quite jarring. I had no notion that he was ill and I guess we don't exactly know what happened specifically yet.
No. So we will refrain from suggesting. But one of the neat things about Chris is before he worked at the LA Times as a writer, he was a paper boy for the LA Times. He was throwing the paper on people's yards. How about that?
Didn't he get to know, was it Bill Dwyer through that? I can't remember exactly the sequence, but he was certainly a guy who took seriously being a protege of Jim Murray's in a way, right? And things like that. And I think Jim Murray, I'm sure, would look fondly on all of what Chris has done. And I forgot that he had been a paper boy, though. That's kind of perfect.
And one of his famous sort of regular shticks was he was the Duff rank man. He was he would rank. His rankings were just hilarious.
Going as far as to change his Twitter handle to Duff rank man.
Yes, that's right.
Doof maybe.
Yeah,
I don't
Doof.
know.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm thinking Simpsons.
Simpsons.
With Duff.
Same here.
Doof. It was Doof for sure. So look, Chris. Wow, tough news. Rest in peace, my friend.
Yeah, Chris. We will miss you, brother.
All right, Vahe. Thanks a lot, my friend.
Thanks, Blair.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to our production staff of Derek Donovan, Savannah Smith, Randy Mason, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett. A tip of the cap to Vahe Gregorian for stopping by, and to former Royals manager Ned Yost for sharing that story about Edinson Volquez. Links to Royals stories can be found in the show notes, and all of our Royals coverage is available on the True Blue app. Hey, earlier in the episode, you heard me talk about the Sports Pass offer. It still stands. It's a good one. $30 for a year's worth of sports coverage, and that includes Sports Extra on the e-edition. Here's an even better offer. Buy the entire Kansas City Star product. Sports, news, features, commentary, and analysis, the whole thing. You get all the stories written by my talented colleagues, plus extra news, sports, and business coverage. The details can be found at account.kansascity.com account.kansascity.com/subscribe. That's account.kansascity.com/subscribe. Whether it's the Sports Pass or the full subscription, you're getting and supporting the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City and helping us produce programs like SportsBeat KC. Thanks for listening.